I gotta tell you, when Life is Strange True Colors was announced earlier this year, I was super excited for it, and I am so happy that the game has more than met my expectations. Love the characters, love the story, love the visuals, love the mystery, love the music, love it, love it, love it. Life is Strange True Colors centers around Alex Chen, a young woman who comes to the small town of Haven Springs, Colorado, to start a new life with her brother Gabe, who she hasn't seen for 8 whole years. However, the hope for a peaceful new life doesn't last, as it's not long before Gabe is killed in what some would believe is a tragic accident. But Alex and her new friends know that there's a lot more buried underneath the surface. And as if unraveling the mystery of her brother's death isn't enough to deal with, Alex also has to deal with what she calls a curse, the psychic power of empathy. She can see other people's intense emotions as colorful auras, and if they feel something strongly enough, their emotions can infect her, and she starts to feel it too. So much so that she could see the world through their eyes. Since I just got done playing the whole game here on the channel, there was no way I could resist doing a video in the What If series, where I take 5 characters from the game and give them a team of 4 Pokemon apiece. So, tune your guitars and take a shot of some bedazzled kiwi schnapps as I tell you what I think it'd be like if Life is Strange True Colors characters were Pokemon trainers. And just in case you haven't played Life is Strange True Colors or watched my Let's Play of it yet, big time heckin' spoilers ahead! Let's start things off with the person who brought Alex to Haven Springs in the first place, her older brother, Gabe Chen. Voiced by Han Soto, Gabe is charismatic, funny, outgoing, and charming, and always willing to help other people out. Gabe and Alex were separated when they were kids after their mother died of cancer, and their father basically abandoned them after cracking under the pressure of trying to raise 2 kids by himself. While Alex ended up in the foster care system, Gabe stole a car and found himself in juvenile hall. Some years later, in his efforts to reconnect with his estranged family, Gabe ended up coming to the small town of Haven Springs, where he quickly bonded with the locals, made some very good friends, and even found love. And while Alex doesn't get to spend very much time with her brother at all once she arrives in Haven Springs herself, due to Gabe's untimely death at the end of episode 1, it's obvious just how much he meant to the people around him, and how much he touched each of their lives. For Gabe's Pokemon team, let's start off with a Passimian, a Pokemon whose Pokedex entries detail how it lives in groups and displays tremendous teamwork, much like how Gabe would go out of his way to help others and just wanted to see them succeed. Speaking of which, I think Go-Go would be a pretty good second pick, as it could represent the ram that's displayed on Gabe's t-shirt, signifying that as the animal that Gabe is most closely associated with thematically. And of course, goats are often symbolized as, among other things, the confidence that one won't fall off the proverbial mountain and will become a better person, something that Gabe clearly wants both for himself and for those around him. After that, we'll go with a Smeargle, mainly to represent Gabe's connection to his artist girlfriend Charlotte, and Charlotte's aspiring comic book artist son Ethan, to whom Gabe essentially becomes a father figure, or as he likes to call it, Dad Plus. And to round things out, I'll go with a Comfey, a Pokemon that's so all about healing that it literally has a signature ability called Triage, which gives +3 priority to any move that has a healing effect, which I think would be pretty perfect for Gabe, considering how all he wanted for Alex was for her to be able to leave the pain from her past behind and to be able to start a new life. And to be fair, she eventually did, though he's probably wishing he could have been there to see it. Next up, let's talk about one of Gabe's best friends in Haven Springs, and one of Alex's potential love interests, Ryan Lucan. Voiced by Eric Emery, Ryan Lucan is the son of the owner of the Black Lantern and local town hero, Jed Lucan, who's lauded in Haven Springs for once rescuing 19 of his fellow miners from a cave-in 12 years prior to the events of the game. And Ryan absolutely followed in his father's heroic footsteps, becoming a Colorado State Park ranger and learning all he could about nature and wildlife to help keep people safe. And in case you have any doubts about whether Ryan really loves nature, as if him constantly correcting people about animal facts wouldn't be enough evidence, when he and Alex first meet in True Colors' main story, it's at the local record shop where Ryan happens to be picking up, of all things, an album called An Outdoorsman's Guide to the Calls of Common Birds. Hey, in his defense, the National Park Service did give it 5 stars. As long as we're talking about birds, we may as well start off Ryan's Pokemon team with a Braviary, to not only represent his love and knowledge of all things birds, but also to represent his bravery in tense situations, like when he came up with a plan to rescue Ethan towards the end of episode 1 and help calm Alex down right before she went to enact that plan. After that, we'll give him a Trevenant, a Pokemon who's known for striking down those who would dare to harm nature, which I think would be a pretty good reference to Ryan's job as a park ranger, or as Alex would put it, a tree cop. Next up, we'll go with an Audino, a Pokemon whose Pokedex entries state that it's very sensitive to the emotions of those around it, something that's perfect for Ryan, as he's shown to have a great deal of sensitivity to and awareness of what's going on with other people. A prime example being in episode 1 when, despite not knowing about Alex's empathic powers, Ryan does pick up that Alex is being adversely affected by seeing Steph's angry phone conversation play out, and almost immediately offers to help Steph with her issue in a way that would also calm down Alex. And lastly, we're gonna round out his team with a Stoutland, a Pokemon that often acts as a rescue dog and is also known for being good-natured, which is Ryan Lucan to a T. I mean, the dude absolutely has soft golden retriever himbo energy, right? Like that's not just me. I mean, I know Stoutland isn't based on a golden retriever specifically, but whatever, shut up, just let me have this, okay? As long as we're talking about Alex's love interests, and considering you meet her in the same scene as Ryan anyway, let's move on to Haven Springs' local TTRPG DM / record store DJ / punk rock lesbian, Steph Gingrich. Voiced by Katie Bentz, Steph is unique in True Color's story, as she's actually a returning member of the cast. She originally debuted in Life is Strange Before the Storm, where she was selling bootleg DVDs to Chloe Price, playing tabletop RPGs with her friend Mikey, and being the stage manager for Blackwell Academy's production of The Tempest. Some years after the tragic events of the first Life is Strange, Steph left Arcadia Bay, basically bouncing around different places as part of a two-piece punk band called Drugstore Makeup, before being brought to Haven Springs by a chance booking by, who else? Gabe Chen, who convinced Steph to stay in town with a game of foosball, which, you know, is how I personally think all major life decisions should be handled. In the same part of episode 1 where you meet Ryan at Rocky Mountain Record Traders, you also run into Steph, who has Alex pick the next song that she's gonna play on the radio station she DJs for, and when you meet her again properly a bit later on at the Black Lantern, the two of them quickly bond over great indie music and not so great obscure liquor shots. Throughout the story of True Colors, Steph proves to be a great ally in Alex's search for answers, as well as someone who's just really fucking cool to be around, especially considering that, when Ethan's feeling distraught in episode 3, she turns the entirety of Haven Springs into a makeshift LARP session just for him. Witty, sarcastic, and nerdy as hell, Steph is, without a doubt, one of the coolest characters in the whole series, and I honestly just hope she comes back around in future installments. Look, I need more gay nerd content, alright? Speaking of being a nerd, let's start off Steph's Pokemon team with a Miss Magius, both as a general reference to her love of TTRPGs, and as a bit of an aesthetic pick, considering that, during the episode 3 LARP, she actually dressed as a witch who ran a magical item shop. Of course, Miss Magius, being a ghost type, could also reference Steph's tendency to ghost people, as we saw in the DLC side story Wavelengths. Speaking of ghosts, next up we'll go with a Rotom, a Pokemon who loves to overshadow technology and use it as its own body, as a callback to Steph being in charge of the light board for the Tempest, as well as her working the DJ booth during her time in Haven Springs. Though the latter certainly took some getting used to. After that, we'll go with a Whimsicott, whose Pokedex entries state that it doesn't live in a fixed location, much like how Steph herself was just going from place to place before landing in Haven Springs, and she had even been planning to leave again towards the end of episode 4 of the main story. And lastly, I'm gonna give Steph a Rillaboom, a Pokemon whose whole evolutionary line is based on drummers, which is a perfect Pokemon for Steph, as she's a drummer herself, having played the drums for Drugstore Makeup prior to True Colors, as well as playing alongside Alex's performance of Blister in the Sun during episode 4, which was a killer performance, by the way, and everyone at the Spring Festival seemed to love it. But let's be honest with each other for a second. If this were more realistic, you know that there'd be at least one asshole 4 beers deep in the back of the crowd yelling, "Play Freebird!" Personally, my money's on Mac. But let's take a step back now and talk about one of the most fascinating characters in the cast, the one and only Reginald McAllister III, aka Ducky. Voiced by Jim Hunt, Ducky is a friendly, eccentric, and well-traveled man who's described by Steph in the Wavelengths DLC as having lived 12 whole-ass lives, and honestly, she's not wrong. He's been an entrepreneur, acted in theater, played a part in a sci-fi film, was in a TV infomercial, served in the Korean War, and even has a tontine going with some of his soldier buddies, which basically means that he and his friends buried some stuff of high value in the Nevada desert that's meant to be given to the last one of them who stays alive. Yeah, he's in a death wager with his friends. Like, for fun. Ducky is by far one of the friendliest people in Haven Springs, always willing to offer his time and friendship to his fellow citizens in his own unique ways. As it turns out though, even Ducky has a bit of a troubled past. According to the town council dossiers kept by Diane on her USB stick in episode 3, Ducky had come to Haven Springs not too long after resigning from the board of directors of his own company, following some sort of falling out with his daughter Mabel, and while he was able to find love in the small town with a woman named Tabitha Baker, she would eventually pass away, leaving Ducky pretty forlorn, especially during the spring festival that he and Tabitha both loved so much. Alex can use her powers to help Ducky deal with his grief and share a really sweet moment of reminiscence with him during episode 4 and convince him that celebrating the festival and living his wonderfully intricate life is still worth doing, even if Tabitha is no longer there to do it with him. To start off Ducky's Pokemon team, let's go with an aesthetic pick and give him a Sirfetch'd, a duck Pokemon with a noble disposition, to represent both Ducky's namesake and his tendency to speak in a very proper manner. Speaking of aesthetic picks, next up let's go with a Drampa, a kind and friendly Pokemon who's perfect for someone like Ducky, who does his best to befriend everyone around him in Haven Springs. After that, we'll go with an Ursaring, to represent the giant wooden bear that Ducky carved, by hand mind you, that stands in the back of the Black Lantern, something he'd end up using to impress Tabitha when they first met. And to round things out, let's go with a Spinda, a Pokemon that always stumbles around like it's had a few too many drinks, and well, let's be honest here. If there's nothing else that Ducky loves in this world, it's a little bit of booze. We're talking about a guy who convinced Steph that his character in the episode 3 LARP should be the only survivor of a violent massacre at the Black Lantern just so he can have an excuse to stand behind the bar and give himself free drinks. Not to mention the part in episode 1 where, while working as a server in the Black Lantern, Alex has to find Ducky's favorite rye whiskey for his order, which turns out to be between the cushions of Gabe's couch. Yeah, cause nothing really livens up the flavor of rye whiskey than some good old-fashioned couch lint. And last, but certainly not least, it's the protagonist of Life is Strange True Colors, an aspiring musician, a relentless pun machine, and an absolute bisexual disaster, Alex Chen. Voiced by Erica Mori, with singing vocals provided by MXM Alex is shy around new people at first, but once she comes out of her shell, she's witty, sharp, friendly, and always ready to fire off a pun, talk about her musical taste, or throw out a gratuitous wink. Mostly at cute TTRPG DMs. Alex arrives in Haven Springs after 8 years apart from her brother Gabe, looking to start a whole new life after a childhood of tragedy and turmoil. Due to the last wishes of her dying mother Wendy to always be strong, especially for those she cared about, Alex tends to put the needs of others ahead of her own, and as a result of that, other people's negative emotions can have a pretty heavy impact on her. That's definitely not helped by the power she discovers she has at some point during her life, the psychic power of empathy, which allows her to see the strong emotions of other people as colorful auras, and if they feel something strongly enough or intensely enough, it can affect her directly, and she starts to feel it too. Throughout the story of True Colors, Alex has to deal with the loss of her brother, the dark secrets hiding beneath the cozy surface of the town of Haven Springs, and how to come to terms with her empathic abilities to handle the strong emotions of others, as well as not letting herself be afraid to feel her own emotions. So, you know, No pressure. To start off Alex's Pokemon team, we'll go with a Hatterene, a Pokemon whose whole evolutionary line is about suppressing one's own emotions for your own good, which could reference how Alex often tried to hide her own emotions and her own trauma, not to mention keep her empath powers under wraps, in order to try and fit in and just lead a normal life. Not to mention that Hatterene can have the ability Anticipation, which senses if an enemy Pokemon has a super effective move, which could represent Alex's sensing other people's emotions, or Healer, which has a chance to heal an ally Pokemon status condition, which could represent Alex's need to help others and put others' needs before her own. After that, we'll go with a Toxtricity, a Pokemon that often moves and launches attacks in such a way that's similar to someone strumming a guitar, a reference to Alex's love of music and playing guitar specifically, both of which she would often use as a coping mechanism during hard times. After that, I'm gonna give her an Incineroar, a Pokemon based on a tiger, the animal that Alex seems to be the most closely thematically associated with, not to mention that its Pokedex entry in Shield notes that, while it's notable for rough and aggressive behavior, it has a kind side to it and is willing to help out smaller Pokemon, much like how Alex herself was often written off as a problem child by prospective adoptive parents, but is actually a sweet and caring person who's always willing to help others out, even if that helping out involves bragging about winning at foosball like she does against Steph in episode 2. And lastly, I'm gonna round out Alex's team with an Absol, a Pokemon perfect for someone who believes that her constant misfortune and the lack of being accepted anywhere she went made her broken. But just like Absol itself, Alex is gravely misunderstood and unfairly judged because of an aspect of herself that she absolutely did not ask for, and those who actually take the time to get to know her would certainly tell you that she's one of the best friends you could ever have. Well, unless she beats you at foosball, then she's kind of an insufferable braggart, but then again, so am I. Well, shit, no wonder her character resonated with me so much. But now I want to hear from you. What Pokemon do you think the characters from True Colors would have on their teams? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a like if you liked it, subscribe for more in the future, share it on your favorite social medias, and ring the bell to make sure you always get notified when I upload. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, friendos.